Hey, it's Ryan from Ryonet, and today we're going to talk about some differences between actually pushing and pulling a squeegee. So a lot of people push a squeegee, a lot of people pull a squeegee. Some people push and pull. We're going to talk about a little bit of a difference between the two concepts of printing manually and show you some tips and tricks as far as which one might be best for you and what applications to use which one for. So for me, I personally do both. I like pushing for some applications, I like pulling from some applications. Now, the difference is let's talk about pulling first. When you're pulling a squeegee, you're using a lot of pressure, a lot of muscle. You want to make sure that you're down above the print. A lot of people, like when they're pulling the squeegee, they start to lean back with the screen print. That's no good. You want to make sure that you're down and above the print. Your squeegee is typically at a 70, 75, 80 degree angle depending on how much ink you want to lay down. Now the thing I like about pulling is you can control the ink, I feel, a little bit better. I can lower my squeegee angle to lay more ink down, or I can raise it to lay less ink down. I can do that, automatically through the print. I can change that as I see more ink or less ink needing to be laid down like that. It's very, very important that you're putting enough pressure down when you're pulling a squeegee to clear the screen. If your angle's too low or you're putting too much pressure and you're bending out the blade, you're not printing, you're smashing ink through the screen. So let's do a pull print here. It does take a good amount of pressure, especially printing with white ink. So there's a pull print. You see I have to really bear down on that to clear the screen out. Now, the thing about a pull print is once you're on the top, you have to pick the ink up and move it back. Sometimes the ink will drip back into your screen, or you can sit the ink like that and flood it back. When you're flooding, you can flood with the screen down, but make sure you don't put enough pressure down to actually have ink go through the screen. So that is an example of a pull print. So the reason why I like a pull print, once again, is I can control the angle. So if I want to lay more ink down, I can lower the angle like that. So printing like this, if you see this print right here, it's rather dull. If I lower the angle here, I'm laying more ink down through the screen. You see a lot more white ink coming out of that print now. Okay, so that's pulling. Let's move over to pushing. So pushing, you flood the screen up, and then you push back. Now let me preface that you should never pull and then push a print in the same. So what I'm doing right now is strictly for demonstration purposes. Once a print is registered for pulling, you always want to pull it. If a print is registered for pushing, you always want to push it. Now, when I'm pushing the squeegee, my angle is pretty much set. It's really hard for me to go with a lower angle or a higher angle, because if I go with too high of an angle, it doesn't print. If I go too low of an angle, it doesn't print. It just kind of shears the ink through the screen. So I have to have a medium angle right here, about 70 degrees or so, and you want a little bit thicker blade too. Sometimes if your blade's too loose, if you put too much pressure, it kind of buckles under the pressure. But the nice thing about it is I can actually put my weight into the screen, and it will help me accomplish a good screen print. So I can put my weight in there, and I'm not relying 100% on my muscle to do the print. So a lot of times, people who don't have as much muscle like the pushing, because you can actually use your weight to help you accomplish the screen print. So there's an example of a push. Now I definitely didn't lay as much ink down. Even if I go over it a second time, I can't lay as much ink down because I can't lower the angle of that squeegee. So there's it over a second time. You can see there's definitely more ink down on that because it allows me to manually lower the angle a little bit. So one thing that is a huge no-no is to do a push and then a pull. So let's do an example of that. So we printed our first color of the simulated process print. Let's see what would happen if we actually pulled this red instead of pushing it. The red's typically set up for a pull. Now remember, the second print that we did was actually done as a push stroke. When you change the stroke, you're actually moving the mesh at a different angle, so the ink is coming at a different angle and will change registration. So if we did a push stroke, even though this print registers, so let's do a pull stroke on this, because this was originally registered and set up for a pull stroke. So one pass. So you can see perfect registration there. But come over here, and now we do a pull stroke on this one. Watch what happens. we're off registration. You can see white coming through that print. On registration right there, and this is just slightly off registration. The reason that is because that ink, as you're printing, is moving and changing direction. Now, this is actually a quick tip and trick that you can learn if you want to like play around with registration and you're in the middle of a job and something slightly changes on you or you just can't get that registration in. Let's say this one was just slightly off. Well, what we could do is we could actually do a print, and then we could do a pull print for the first one, and if it was just slightly off registration for the second one, instead of having to re-register the press, we could do a push print, and then by changing the print, it would actually knock it into registration. Get that? So you could do a pull print on one and a push print on the other. Now you would have to manually remember that, and I've done that with jobs before, and you'll be printing jobs really fast, and then you're used to pulling, and you say, oh yeah, I have to push that one color. Sometimes you forget, and then it's off registration. But it is a quick tip and trick that you can actually use to speed up a registration process if you're just slightly off. So definitely get on press, play around, see what works best for you. You might just figure out that you like pushing all the prints. Maybe you like pulling all the prints more. Maybe you like pulling some of the prints, like the white inks, something that you want to control the ink a little bit more. Maybe you like pushing for high detail, for production. It's really up to you, but find the preference that you like for the applications. And hopefully this video made some sense and helped you kind of choose between the two different styles of printing.